The email from the school board sat unopened in my inbox for 3 hours. Each time my cursor hovered over it, my stomach twisted into a tighter knot. When I finally clicked, the words blurred together except for one phrase that burned into my retinas: concerns regarding emotional stability and professional conduct. I'm Reagan, and until today, I thought being a high school art teacher was the one part of my life my mother couldn't touch. My phone buzzed. Speaking of the devil, my mother's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring while I reread the email, trying to make sense of the accusations, alleged outbursts during parent-teacher conferences, reports of erratic behavior from a concerned colleague, anonymous complaints about my teaching methods. The phone buzzed again, and again. "What do you want?" I answered, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Darling, I just heard the most concerning thing from Timothy at the school board." My mother's voice dripped with manufactured worry. "Why didn't you tell me you were struggling?" The pieces clicked into place. Timothy, her faithful friend of 20 years who happened to be on the school board. Of course. "I'm not struggling," I said. "But you already know that, don't you?" "Reagan, sweetie, this defensive attitude is exactly what I'm worried about. I only spoke to Timothy because I care. Someone needed to intervene before..." "Before what?" My free hand clenched into a fist. "Before I actually succeeded at something without your interference?" "Don't be dramatic. I simply shared some observations as a concerned parent. A mother knows when her child needs help. I thought of the student art show I'd organised last month, the grant proposal I'd just submitted, the summer programme I was developing. All the things I'd built piece by piece that she was now systematically destroying. Does Madison know what you're doing?" I asked, mentioning my sister. "Your sister understands that family has to look out for each other. Speaking of which, she just made junior partner at her firm. Isn't that wonderful?" Of course she had. My mother probably engineered that too. "I have to go," I said. "I have papers to grade. We should discuss this over dinner tomorrow. Your sister and Eric will be there. 6 o'clock sharp." It wasn't a request. It never was with her. After hanging up, I called Christian, my fellow teacher and closest friend at school. "Someone's been feeding the board false information about me," I said when he answered. "I know. Amy's been in and out of Timothy's office all week." Amy, my most competitive colleague. Another one of my mother's pawns. "How bad is it?" I asked. "They're discussing your contract next week. Reagan, what's really going on?" I stared at the student artwork covering my classroom walls. Years of trust and connection, of helping teenagers find their voice through art. All of it at risk because my mother couldn't stand to see me thrive independently. "My mother's trying to destroy my career," I said, "and I'm going to stop her." "What are you going to do?" I thought of all the times she'd undermined me, the subtle digs at family gatherings. The way she'd always positioned Madison as the successful daughter while painting me as the unstable one. 20 years of manipulation, all leading to this moment. "First, I'm going to dinner tomorrow night," I said. "Then I'm going to make her regret ever using her therapy background to play games with people's lives." After hanging up, I found an old photo in my desk drawer. My mother, Madison, and me at my college graduation. My mother's arm was around Madison's shoulders, while I stood slightly apart, already feeling the distance growing. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. "Mum says you're having problems at work. Why didn't you tell me?" I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and began typing, documenting every manipulation, every lie, every subtle abuse of power. This time, I wouldn't let her rewrite the narrative. This time, I would write my own story. I arrived at my mother's house exactly 7 minutes late, my small act of defiance. Through the front window, I could see my sister already seated at the dining table, her perfect posture a testament to our mother's influence. Matthew squeezed my hand before I got out of his car. "Want me to come in?" "No," I said. "This needs to be family only." The smell of rosemary chicken hit me as I entered. My favourite dish, which meant my mother was already in manipulation mode. She appeared in the hallway, wineglass in hand. "Reagan, darling, we were getting worried." "Were you?" I kept my coat on. Like you were worried enough to talk to the school board? My sister's husband, Eric, appeared from the kitchen, looking uncomfortable. Maybe we should all sit down first. The dining room felt smaller than usual, cramped with unspoken accusations. Madison wouldn't meet my eyes as I took my seat. I found your note, I said to her. She looked up, confused. What note? The one warning me about Mum's plans. You left it in my classroom. I haven't been to your classroom in months, my sister said. My mother placed the serving dish on the table with practiced grace. Madison's been far too busy with her new position to play messenger. Speaking of which, tell Reagan about the Tokyo project, dear. I watched my sister's face carefully as she launched into a story about her firm's international expansion. There was something off about her enthusiasm, a slight strain around her eyes. Fascinating, my mother said, refilling wine glasses. Such a contrast to teaching finger painting to teenagers. Art therapy, I corrected, which you'd understand if you'd ever bothered to visit my classroom. Let's not start this again, Madison interrupted. Mum's just concerned about... About what? I put down my fork. About me succeeding without her puppet strings. Eric shifted in his seat. Reagan, maybe this isn't the best time. It's the perfect time, I said, pulling out my phone. Because I have some interesting texts from Amy about her meetings with Timothy. Want to explain those, Mom? The room went silent. My mother dabbed her lips with a napkin, buying time. Timothy mentioned your colleague was concerned about your emotional state, she said carefully. As a former therapist, I merely offered my professional insight. By suggesting I'm unstable? That I'm unfit to teach? Madison's head snapped up. Mom, you didn't. Of course not, darling. Your sister is twisting things as usual. Like you twisted things when Madison applied for her first internship. The words shot out before I could stop them. My sister's face paled. What are you talking about? Nothing, our mother said quickly. Reagan's just upset about work. Show me, Madison demanded, looking at me. Show me what you know. I pulled out the envelope I'd brought. Inside were copies of emails I'd discovered. Correspondence between our mother and Madison's first boss, carefully orchestrating my sister's career path. I found these when I started digging, I said. There's more. Madison's hands shook as she read. Eric leaned over her shoulder, his expression darkening. You told me I earned that position, Madison whispered. You did earn it, our mother insisted. I simply smoothed the path. Like you're smoothing my path right out of my job? I asked. The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension. My mother stood up, relief flooding her face. That'll be Timothy. I invited him to join us for dessert. Of course you did, I said, standing. Another witness to help paint me as the unstable daughter. Madison grabbed my arm as I moved to leave. Wait, I want to hear more about these emails. Our mother paused halfway to the door. Madison, darling, don't let your sister's paranoia... Stop. Madison's voice cracked. Just stop talking, Mom. I watched something shift in my sister's eyes, the first crack in her perfect facade. For the first time, she was seeing our mother clearly. Timothy's voice boomed from the hallway. Evelyn, everything all right? I gathered my things, heading for the back door. Ask your friend about the board meeting next week, I told my mother, about how they're reviewing my contract. Reagan, please. But I was already gone, leaving behind a half-eaten meal and a family finally starting to unravel. In my car, I found a new text from Madison. We need to talk, without Mum. Maybe I wasn't the only one ready for the truth. The mysterious report landed on my desk Monday morning. 37 pages detailing my supposed psychological instability and professional misconduct. My hands trembled as I flipped through accusations dressed up in clinical language, each page reeking of my mother's influence. You need to see this, Christian said, bursting into my classroom during lunch. He held his phone out, showing an email chain between Timothy and Amy. They've been meeting twice a week for months. I scanned the messages, my throat tightening. She's been feeding him information about every class I teach. There's more. Christian lowered his voice. Amy's applying for the department head position. Timothy's fast-tracking her application. My position, the one I'd been working toward for 3 years. A knock at the door made us both jump. Madison stood in the doorway looking exhausted. Can we talk? Christian squeezed my shoulder as he left. My sister took his place, examining the student artwork on the walls. "Remember when you won that art competition in high school?" she asked. "Mom told everyone you cheated." "I remember. She convinced me it was true. Just like she convinced me about everything else." Madison turned to face me. "The emails you showed me last night, there are more, aren't there? Hundreds, going back years." Madison sank into a student's chair. "She's been orchestrating my entire career, hasn't she? The promotions, the Tokyo project." "Madison, don't." She held up her hand. "I need to know everything." I pulled out my laptop, showing her the folder of evidence I'd collected. Emails, text messages, recorded conversations, a digital trail of our mother's manipulation. "Eric's looking into the legal implications," Madison said, "if she used her therapy credentials to influence professional decisions." My phone buzzed. A text from Amy. "Meeting with the board tomorrow. Hope you're ready." "They're moving fast," I muttered. "Who is?" Before I could answer, another figure appeared in my doorway, Amy wearing a smile that didn't reach her mouth. "Just wanted to wish you luck," she said. "Timothy speaks very highly of your mother, by the way. Such an insightful woman." Madison stood up slowly. "You must be Amy. I've heard so much about you." Amy's smile faltered. "And you are?" "Someone who knows exactly what you're doing." Madison stepped closer. "And why you're doing it?" "I don't know what you mean." "My mother promised to help your son get into that private school, didn't she?" Madison's voice was steel. "In exchange for helping her discredit my sister?" Amy's face drained of colour. "How did you—" "Because she did the same thing to me." Madison pulled out her phone. "But unlike you, I have proof. Want to see the emails?" Amy fled the classroom. Through the window, I watched her rush toward Timothy's office. "How did you know about her son?" I asked. "Eric's law firm handles admissions disputes for that school. He recognized Amy's name from a recent application." Madison's eyes met mine. "Mom's getting sloppy. She's leaving trails everywhere." My phone buzzed again. An anonymous email this time. The subject line made my blood freeze. "Your mother's final move." Inside was a detailed plan to have me removed, not just from my position, but from teaching entirely. Fabricated evidence, orchestrated testimonies, even medical records suggesting a history of mental instability. "She's going to destroy everything," I whispered. Madison read over my shoulder, her face hardening. "No, she won't, because this time, she's not just fighting you." "What do you mean?" "What? I'm done being her perfect puppet." Madison grabbed her bag. "I'm calling Eric. We're going to need legal documents, witness statements, everything we can get. And then what? Then we show her what happens when both her daughters finally fight back." As Madison left, my phone lit up with a message from my mother. "Darling, I heard about tomorrow's board meeting. Don't worry, I've taken care of everything." I stared at those words, feeling something shift inside me. All these years, I'd tried to escape her shadow. Now, it was time to step into the light and blind her with the truth. I texted Christian, "Get ready, tomorrow we end this." His reply came instantly, "Already on it. You won't believe what Timothy just let slip." The game was changing. My mother thought she was protecting her perfect family narrative. She didn't realize she was about to become the villain in her own story. Matthew's apartment felt like neutral territory as I spread the evidence across his kitchen table. Files, emails, and recordings created a map of my mother's manipulation. "This is worse than I thought," he said, examining a particularly damning email chain. "She's been planning this for months." "Years," I corrected. "The school board thing is just her latest move." My phone lit up with a text from Madison. "Found something in Mom's study. Need to meet now." "Go," Matthew said, before I could ask. "But Reagan, be careful. Your mother's not just trying to control you anymore. She's trying to erase you." The drive to Madison's house gave me time to think about how everything had escalated. From subtle undermining to outright sabotage, my mother's tactics had grown bolder, more desperate. Eric opened the door before I could knock. "In the office," he whispered. "Madison's. You need to see this. My sister sat at her desk, surrounded by old papers and photographs. Her hands shook as she held up a manila envelope. I found these while looking for my birth certificate, she said. They're letters from Dad. What letters? The ones Mum hid. The ones explaining why he really left. The room tilted sideways. Our father had abandoned us 15 years ago, or that's what our mother had told us. No explanation, no goodbye, just empty drawers and a story about midlife crisis. He didn't abandon us, Madison's voice cracked. Mum threatened to destroy his medical practice if he didn't leave. She had evidence of prescription fraud, evidence she fabricated. I sank into a chair, memories reshuffling like a deck of cards. The weekly calls that never came through. She blocked his number. Every letter, every attempt to contact us, she intercepted everything. Eric stood in the doorway, lawyer mode engaged. There's more. The trust fund your father set up for both of you? Your mother's been controlling it through some creative legal maneuvering. My phone buzzed. Christian calling. Timothy just confessed, he said without preamble. Your mother promised to help him avoid an audit if he helped discredit you. He's willing to testify. Against my mother? Against all of it. The false reports, the manipulated evaluations, everything. Madison grabbed my arm. Reagan, look at this. She held up another document, a psychiatric evaluation of me from 10 years ago. One I'd never had. She forged it, Madison whispered. She's been building a paper trail of your instability for years. The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity. Every job I'd almost gotten but mysteriously lost. Every relationship that had inexplicably ended. Every opportunity that had slipped away. My phone buzzed again. My mother this time. Darling, I'm hosting a small dinner party tomorrow. The school board chairman will be there. We should discuss your future. She doesn't know we know, Eric said. We can use that. Madison pulled out one final document. A power of attorney form with a signature that looked suspiciously like mine. Found this in her filing cabinet, she said. It's dated next month. My blood turned to ice. She was going to have me declared incompetent. Not was, Madison corrected. Is. This is her endgame, Reagan. Complete control. The room spun as years of gaslighting, manipulation, and calculated destruction fell into place. My mother hadn't just been trying to control my life. She'd been systematically dismantling it. The dinner party tomorrow, I said slowly. That's when she's planning to do it, Eric nodded, with witnesses present, all her carefully chosen allies. Then that's when we end this. I gathered the documents, my hands steady for the first time in days. But first, I need to see Matthew. Why? Because Mum's not the only one who can gather witnesses. I pulled out my phone, typing quickly. Tell Christian to get ready. Tomorrow night we're going to give her exactly what she wants. A public performance. As I drove home, my mother's text arrived. Wear the blue dress tomorrow, darling. You know how much better you look when you listen to my advice. I smiled, thinking of the evidence safely copied and distributed among trusted hands. For once, I'd take her advice. The blue dress would be perfect for her final show. The school board meeting room felt like a courtroom as I laid out the evidence. Timothy sat at the far end, his face ashen, as I presented emails showing his collusion with my mother. These communications clearly show a pattern of interference, I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. A deliberate attempt to manipulate staff evaluations through personal connections. The board chairman leaned forward. Miss Reagan, these are serious allegations, but your mother's reputation in this community is exactly why she got away with it for so long. I pulled out another document. This is a statement from Amy detailing how my mother promised to secure private school admission for her son in exchange for false testimony about my teaching methods. Timothy shifted in his seat. I think we should adjourn to discuss. There's more. I met his eyes. Would you like to tell them or should I? The door opened and Madison walked in carrying a leather portfolio. The chairman frowned. This is a closed meeting. I'm here as legal counsel, my sister said, laying out more documents. These show a pattern of manipulation extending beyond the school system. I watched Timothy's face as he recognized his own signature on papers he thought were destroyed. His friendship with my mother had made him careless, leaving trails of evidence he never thought would surface. "I was trying to help," he whispered. "Evelyn said you were struggling. Like she said our father abandoned us." I pushed a letter across the table. This is his actual statement about why he left. Notice the date and the notary stamp. The chairman removed his glasses, rubbing his temples. "Timothy, is this true?" Before he could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Christian. "Your mother just arrived at the school. She's heading to the meeting." Perfect timing. The door opened again and my mother swept in, radiating concern. "Reagan, darling, what are you doing?" "Telling the truth," I said, "for once." "These delusions of persecution are exactly what I've been worried about." She turned to the board. "As a mental health professional." "Former professional," Madison interrupted, sliding another document forward. "Your license was suspended 3 years ago. You never told anyone." The colour drained from my mother's face. "Madison, what are you doing here?" "Supporting my sister, finally." My mother's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something dark and desperate underneath. "I have documentation about Reagan's condition." "Forged documentation," Madison said. "We found the originals, along with this." She pulled out the power of attorney form. My mother's hands twitched. "You were going to have me declared incompetent," I said quietly, "at your dinner party tomorrow night. The board chairman, Timothy, all your carefully chosen witnesses. It was going to be your masterpiece, wasn't it? I was protecting you. You were destroying me, like you destroyed Dad's practice, like you've been destroying every chance I had at independence." The chairman stood up. "I think we've heard enough. Timothy, you'll need to tender your resignation. As for the rest—" "Wait." My mother's voice took on the smooth, professional tone I knew too well. "Before you make any decisions, you should know that Madison's firm represents several board members' families. This could be seen as a conflict of interest." "Stop." Madison's voice cracked. "Just stop, Mom. I'm leaving the firm. And the country." My heart stopped. "What?" "Eric got a position in London. We're leaving next month." Madison wouldn't meet my eyes. "I was going to tell you." "When?" I demanded. "After Mum's dinner party, after she had me committed." The room spun as another piece of my support system crumbled. My mother's smile returned, subtle but triumphant. "You see," she said softly, "everyone leaves eventually, except me. I'm the only one who truly— Get out!" The words felt like glass in my throat. "All of you, just get out." As they filed out, Timothy paused. "Reagan, I'm sorry, I'll testify about everything." I stared at the scattered papers, evidence of a lifetime of manipulation. My phone buzzed again, Matthew asking if I was okay. I wasn't. But for the first time, I saw clearly what needed to happen next. The dinner party tomorrow would still go on. But it wouldn't end the way my mother planned. It would end the way I planned. The intervention wasn't going as planned. We sat in Matthew's living room, Madison, Eric, Christian and Timothy, while I laid out the final pieces of evidence against my mother. But something felt wrong. "These documents," Timothy said, examining the forged psychiatric evaluations, "they're not just about control, they're about fear." "Fear of what?" I asked. "Of you becoming like your father." Madison's voice was barely audible. "Mum told me things, Reagan. Things about Dad that I never told you." My stomach dropped. "What things?" "That he was unstable, that he had episodes. She showed me medical records." "Forged records," I interrupted, "like everything else." "No." Madison pulled out her phone, showing me a video. "This is from Dad's practice. Security footage from the day before he left." The grainy image showed our father throwing things, screaming at staff. I felt the room tilt. "That's not possible," I whispered. "It's real," Timothy confirmed. "I verified it myself. Your mother didn't forge everything, Reagan. Some of it was protection." Christian stepped forward. "But that doesn't excuse—" "I'm pregnant," Madison blurted out. "That's the real reason we're going to London. Mum found out and she said she'd help keep the baby safe. From you." The words hit like physical blows. "You believe her?" I don't know what to believe anymore. Madison's eyes filled with tears. But I saw the genetic testing she had done on both of us years ago, the markers for Dad's condition. Stop. My voice didn't sound like my own. Just stop. Eric spoke for the first time. We're not saying your mother was right, but maybe some of her actions came from a place of, get out. I stood up, knocking over my chair. All of you, now. They left quietly, leaving only Matthew. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Reagan, did you know? I turned to face him. About the video? The genetic testing? His silence was answer enough. How long? Your mother showed me last week. She said if I really loved you, I'd help her get you treatment. The betrayal tasted like copper in my mouth. And you believed her? I believed the medical records, the genetic tests, the pattern of behavior she documented. The pattern she created! I grabbed my keys. She manufactured every piece of evidence, every crisis, every failure in my life to make me look unstable, and you all bought it. Where are you going? To my mother's house. I checked my phone. Still 2 hours until her dinner party. I'm going to end this. Reagan, wait! But I was already gone, driving through streets that blurred with tears I refused to shed. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Madison, Matthew, Christian. I ignored them all. My mother's house glowed with warm light, already set up for her carefully orchestrated evening. She opened the door before I could knock. I was wondering when you'd arrive, she said softly. Come in, darling, we have so much to discuss. I followed her into the study where familiar papers covered her desk. The forged evaluations, the power of attorney, the genetic tests. They're not all fake, she said, reading my mind as she always did. Your father's condition was real. His episodes, his instability, that I didn't create those. But you used them to control us, to control me, to protect you. She touched my cheek. You have so much of him in you. The passion, the creativity, and the darkness. I jerked away. Stop. I've watched you for years, seeing the signs, the same patterns. I had to maintain control, don't you see? For your own good. By destroying my life? By saving it. She picked up a folder. These are the real records. Your real evaluations. Read them, darling. Then you'll understand why tomorrow's intervention is necessary. My phone buzzed again. A text from Madison. Mum's right. Please let us help you. The walls seemed to close in as decades of carefully constructed doubt crashed over me. What if she was right? What if everything I thought was manipulation was actually protection? What if I really was? No. I grabbed the folder. This ends tonight. My mother's smile turned sad. Oh, darling, it's already ended. They're all here. The study door opened, revealing Madison, Matthew, Eric, and a man I didn't recognize, holding a medical bag. For your own good, my mother whispered. The dinner party guests arrived to find me already seated at the head of my mother's table. Their confused murmurs died as I held up a USB drive. Please sit down, I said. The show's about to begin. My mother froze in the doorway, the doctor with his medical bag hovering behind her. Madison and Matthew exchanged worried glances. Reagan, darling. No. I connected the drive to the projector my mother used for her charity presentations. You've done enough talking. The screen flickered to life, showing a familiar scene. My father's medical practice. But this wasn't the security footage Madison had shown me. Watch carefully, I said as the timestamp showed the day before the infamous incident. See who enters Dad's office. My mother's face drained of colour as she watched herself on screen, adding something to my father's coffee. Interesting choice of medication, I continued. The same one that caused his episode the next day. The one you used to prove his instability. Madison's hand flew to her mouth. Mom, keep watching. I switched to another video, more recent footage from my mother's study. Here's Timothy helping forge those genetic tests you're so worried about, Madison. The ones that convinced you I was dangerous. That's not possible, my mother said, but her voice wavered. The medical records. were altered. Christian stepped into the room holding a stack of papers. The real ones just arrived from your father's old partner. He's been keeping them safe, waiting for the right moment. The doctor with the medical bag took a step back. Mrs. Don't leave yet, I said. You'll want to see this part. The projection changed to show emails between my mother and various professionals over the years. Teachers, employers, romantic partners, each one carefully orchestrated to make me appear unstable. You didn't protect me, I said, standing. You destroyed every chance I had at independence because you couldn't stand losing control. Everything I did was for you. Was this for me too? I played one final recording, my mother's voice discussing payment for false testimony with Amy. Or was it for you? The room fell silent as my mother's carefully constructed world began to crumble. Madison stepped away from her, one hand protectively over her stomach. The genetic tests, she whispered. They were fake. All of it was fake. I turned to the gathered guests, my mother's carefully chosen witnesses. Every piece of evidence she planned to use tonight to have me committed, just like she used fake evidence to drive our father away. He was dangerous, my mother insisted, but the words sounded hollow. No, you were dangerous. I pulled out one final document, and now everyone knows. She recognized her own letterhead, the confession she'd written years ago about fabricating evidence against my father, the one she thought she'd destroyed. Where did you get that? Dad's partner kept a copy, along with everything else you tried to erase. The doctor closed his medical bag. I think I should go. One by one, the guests stood, murmuring excuses as they fled the scene of my mother's unravelling. Only Madison, Matthew, and Christian remained. Reagan, my mother tried one last time. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I gathered my evidence. You're not a protector, Mom. You're a predator, and you're not going to hurt anyone else. Matthew stepped forward. Reagan, I'm so sorry. I should have. Not now. I turned to Madison. The choice is yours. London's waiting. My sister looked between us, tears streaming down her face. I can't. I need time. Take it, but take these too. I handed her copies of the real medical records. Read them. Then decide who you want in your baby's life. As I walked toward the door, my mother called out one last time, You can't leave, you're all I have left. I paused, thinking of all the years she'd kept me small, controlled, afraid. No, Mom. You had a family. You had love, but you chose control instead. The front door opened, revealing a police officer. Behind him stood Timothy, looking years older. I called them, he said. It's time to make this right. As they led my mother away, I found a letter in my coat pocket, postmarked 15 years ago, in my father's handwriting. The truth, it seemed, wasn't finished with us yet. My father's letter trembled in my hands as Madison read over my shoulder. We sat in my classroom surrounded by student artwork, the only place that had ever felt truly mine. My dearest daughters, the letter began. If you're reading this, then the truth has finally surfaced. Your mother's greatest fear wasn't that I was unstable. It was that you both would discover her own instability. Madison pressed her hand against her mouth. He knew. He tried to protect us, I said, continuing to read. By leaving, he thought he was keeping her focused on him instead of us. The letter detailed years of manipulation, not just of our father, but of her patients, colleagues, everyone who entered her orbit. She'd built her reputation on destroying others, all while maintaining the perfect facade of concern. There's more, I said, pulling out another envelope. Dad's partner sent these with the medical records. Inside were photos. Our father in another state, watching us graduate, attend performances, live our lives from afar. Always present, always waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. He's alive? Madison whispered, and waiting to meet us. I showed her the address. When you're ready. The classroom door opened. Matthew stood there holding a box of my things from my mother's house. The police found more evidence in her study. Decades of manipulation, all documented. She kept records of everything. Of course she did, I said. It was her trophy collection. Madison touched one of the student paintings, a dark figure emerging into light. What happens now? Now, I stood walking to my desk. Now I teach. I create. I live without her shadow. And London? That's your choice. I faced my sister. But know that distance won't heal this. Trust me, I've tried running. She placed a hand on her stomach. I want my baby to know their aunt, their real family history, not Mum's version. Matthew set down the box. The school board reinstated your position, and they want you to head the new art therapy program. I thought of all the students who'd found their voice in my classroom, while I was still searching for mine. I'll take it, on one condition. What's that? That we document everything, every success, every breakthrough, show that healing doesn't come from control, it comes from freedom. Madison picked up our father's letter again. He's in Arizona. Eric and I, we could delay London, make a detour. Together? I asked. Together. She hugged me, awkward with her growing belly between us. No more running. Christian appeared in the doorway. Timothy's testimony is done. Your mother's facing charges for fraud, medical malpractice, everything. Good, I said, but the victory felt hollow. In the end, exposing her hadn't been about revenge. It had been about breaking free. I pulled out my phone, showing Madison the text I'd received that morning. From our mother. You'll understand someday, when your sister's baby needs protection. Some chains are meant to keep us safe. Delete it, Madison said firmly. We're writing our own story now. I looked around my classroom. At the art that spoke of pain and healing, darkness and light. At Matthew, who'd learned to trust his heart over manipulated evidence. At my sister, choosing truth over comfortable lies. There's one more thing, I said, pulling out a small key. Dad's partner gave me this. It opens a safety deposit box. Said Mum never knew about it. Madison gripped my hand. When do we open it? When we're ready. When we've learned to trust ourselves more than her voice in our heads. Through the window, I watched my students arrive, carrying their art supplies and their stories, each one searching for their voice, just as I had. I have a class to teach, I said. Madison nodded, understanding. I'll call about Arizona. We'll plan it right this time. No secrets, no manipulation. As they left, I turned to my empty classroom, thinking of all the voices that would fill it. My mother had tried to silence mine, but in doing so, she'd taught me the importance of helping others speak. The key to the safety deposit box felt warm in my pocket. A mystery for another day. For now, there were stories to tell, art to create, and a future to build without chains. I picked up my chalk and began writing on the board. Today's lesson, finding your truth through art.